Good evening and welcome to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum's August edition of Drink and Draw. We're very happy to have everybody here tonight. Before we get started, I just want to say real quick, thank you to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for their continued support and all the free programming that we get to do virtually. Even though we are back in the museum now, the museum is open and we're ready for everybody to come see us. We're still going to continue these virtual programs. It just serves us well, it serves everybody else well, and we have a lot of fun doing it, especially Drink and Draw. It's one of our favorite programs to do. So thank you to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for their continued support, along with their sponsor and our sponsor as well, Generac Power Systems. We're very happy to have them on board. They do a great job of keeping us going. And just thank you to both of them for the support that they give us. Tonight, like I said, this is Drink and Draw. I'm going to turn this over to Yvette in just a second so she can get everybody started. But I just want to remind everybody that you can see everybody's muted right now. If you do have a question, please just use the raise your hand emoji. We will definitely unmute you. We want to hear everybody, but we also want to keep our environment safe and free from hackers or anything like that. We have had a couple issues in the past, so these are some of the security protocols we have in place. So if you do have a question, you can either put it in the chat or you could just raise the hand emoji and we'll definitely get to you and get your questions answered. So there's that. Yvette, everybody's here to learn how to draw tonight. So I'm going to turn it directly over to you so everybody can start having fun.
Thanks, Eric. And hi, everybody. Welcome back. If you're joining us again, so good to see you all. If you are new, welcome to Drink and Draw, virtual Drink and Draw. We're not going to be staring at my face all night long, so I'm not worried about this side light that we have going on. And that's because I've got the light focused on the drawing, which you see right here. You'll see my hand. We're going to be looking at that drawing. Today, we're going to focus on markers. So before we start, I want to go ahead and spotlight my image, and then I'll go ahead and spotlight so we got the side-by-side feature now. And you can, I'm going to make mine a little bit, adjust mine just so I can see it. So what we've got now is the drawing that we're going to work on the right. And we got me on the left, and I'm going to end up taking my face off when we get started. But before we get started, like I said, we're going to be working with markers tonight. And one of the reasons I chose markers is the image we're working on is a little bit more of an illustration. We've got a new exhibit coming up in November, which we're super excited about. It's called Souvenirs of Service, the Things They Kept. And it is going to be featuring items from our collection that are, I think it states the obvious, souvenirs from time and service. And it's not exactly the things you might think of when you think about souvenirs. So some of the stories that are coming out are going to be the things that perhaps we always think about going up in the attic and finding that trunk, right, of either your grandfather or your grandmother, and opening that trunk and seeing these amazing articles that you don't know what those stories are, but you know there's some sort of relevance. And oftentimes we wonder, why did we keep those things? We are exploring those stories and those items. And part of my job at the museum is to do some graphic design work. So I'm designing the logo for the exhibit, which includes I'm giving a little bit of a reveal away. So you heard it first here at Drink and Draw, but it's going to be a big travel trunk with travel trunk stickers. And I'm taking all of those stories, well, not all of them, some of the stories, and graphically reinterpreting them into travel stickers that will go on the outside of the trunk. So we will have stickers available for people at our gift shop. But you get to draw one with me today as I start the preliminary design work for this particular story. I have two stories tonight that I'll share with you. This one rings true to my heart. I know it's a favorite of our collections manager. It is from the Steiner family. And I'm going to start out with storytelling at Drink and Draw tonight, just so you have an idea of why this image is the way it is. And I can show you the full image. So what do you see on top there? You see somebody that's a paratrooper, right? So in World War II, Ms. Steiner was a B-20, flew with the B-29 crew in the 40th Air Force bomb group, 40th Bomb Group. and their B-29 got shot down over the China border. And I'm going to pull up the story just so I get it correct. I don't want to misspeak. But on November 21st, 1944, Dick Steiner's B-29 Snafooper bomber, that's the name of it's the Snafooper bomber is the name of his plane, with the 40th Bomb Group was attacked over Japan while approaching its target city of Omura. While badly damaged, the crew members managed to keep the B-29 airborne back across the China Sea. But when the aircraft's unusable fuel supply began to run low, usable fuel supply began to run low, the crew was forced to bail out over Japanese occupied territory in eastern China. The order to jump coming from the aircraft commander as they approached the valley filled with rice paddies. First Lieutenant Floyd Dick Steiner, the aircraft's navigator, was quickly rescued by local farmers and smuggled back to safety. Steiner kept his parachute and ripcord throughout the whole ordeal, and upon returning back to his base in Chakulia, India, a few days later, he mailed the parachute and the ripcord back home to his wife, Majel, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Along with the parachute came his request that she reuse the material to make a new dress for herself. And as she later recounted, when the box arrived, I opened it, and with amazement, I pulled out a roomful of nylon parachute. As an only recently developed synthetic reserved for military usage during the war, nylon was still a novelty in the mid-40s. The silk-like panels were carefully taken apart by her and her friends so that the cloth could be reused for her gown design. Unfortunately, the dress would also require a sturdy lining fabric, something essentially unavailable given wartime limitations. Majel was not deterred, however, and sought help finding it from a fabric company in St. Paul, Minnesota. The company wound up taking an interest in her husband's story, and the dress project soon mailed her several, they were interested in the story and the project, and they mailed her several yards of required lining material. She needed assistance of an experienced dressmaker as well as a rug maker who taught her how to braid the shoulder straps of the parachute cords, and her evening dress was completed in 1945. She had a portrait taken of her in the dress and mailed it to her husband in India. He carried the photograph of her wearing the life-saving parachute material on him for the rest of the tour. He went on to make his career in the Air Force and retired after 31 years of service. So I know that was a long story, but it's one of our favorites here at the museum, and we're super excited because we've written about the parachute dress, we've talked about the parachute dress, and it has never made it to an exhibition. So you come November, folks that are able to visit the museum will be able to see the parachute dress in the flesh. So this sticker that I've designed is Dick Steiner parachuting out from his damaged B-29. And as you can see, he's falling into a box, and then the bottom of the box opens up and poof, there's Majel's dress being made into the opposite side of a parachute. And this pattern in the background here is the windows. If you've never seen a B-29 bomber, it's that real long nose, and then it's got all of those windows on the front. So this adds a nice graphic element. And then afterward, I'll add an additional circle around and put the name of the bomber, and we'll do some other stuff in Photoshop. But for tonight, we want to learn about markers. I picked markers, a little bit more story time, and I'm going to show you the different types of marks that a marker can make. I picked markers because I was cleaning my studio out, and we're approaching the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And for those of you that don't know, I joined the Army just after 9/11, days after. It's a long story. I did not join because of 9/11, but that's a story for a different night. But when I served, we deployed to Iraq in 2003, and about 4 or 5 months in, I was finally able to get things shipped to me overseas. And I had worked in an art store before I joined the Army, and so I knew of these. I coveted the Prismacolor Commercial Illustrator marker. This marker, I talked about Prismacolor colored pencils earlier this year. The Prismacolor marker, for anybody that's done illustration work, this we've got a lot of new markers in the market now, but this was the premier marker of its day. It continues to be a wonderful marker, but Prismacolor are not inexpensive. They are fairly expensive markers. They run about $3 a marker, I believe. And when I worked at an art store, I could not afford these. And so in my deployment, I had all this money at my disposal and nothing to do with it. So I wrote to Dick Blick and I had them ship me the entire box of like 250 markers. And I was in awe when I received it because I'd never been able to splurge on something so expensive. And I was cleaning out my studio and I'm like, there's no way these are still good. They're 20 years old. And lo and behold, and watch, this is gonna test me now, but look at that. They still work beautifully. You can see this is the broad tip side, and you can see they create these wonderful washes. And then you have a thin tip. So you've got the really broad stroke, but then you've got the thin tip too. Now the thin tips on the Prismacolors have a tendency to dry out a little bit faster. But that's okay because we don't want to be doing a lot of outline work anyway. This is sort of the thing you do at the art store, right? When you're trying to see if this is something. Look at that. I just want you to see that mark. This marker I bought in 2003. So I guess I got my money's worth, right? Here we are 20 some years later, probably not that many years later. we're not at 20 years. So 19 years later, I still got these Prismacolor markers. So a little nostalgia from cleaning my studio. That's why we're doing markers today, but it fits with the illustration project that I have before me. So Prismacolor, I don't expect you all to have in front of you. If you do, hooray, let's use them tonight because they make beautiful washes. And we're going to experiment with something my friends told me today while we were outside painting a mural, and that's to add a little alcohol for an interesting wash trick, rubbing alcohol. I bought these Stedlers, and I'm probably saying that incorrectly, Stettlers, last year for a trip to Madeline Island because I wanted to draw the lake with markers. And you can see these have another fine tip, right? These do some wonderful washes too. And then they have the more brush chisel tip on the other side. So you can get a nice wide area, but then that chisel tip still allows you to work thin on top. So that's a nice variety. You almost get 3 different tips on that one. That's a hard color to see. Let me see if I can pick a darker color for you. This is a little bit more sepia color. And you can see the length. It's almost like a brush itself on that tip. And it makes that really beautiful line. And then the chisel tip, you can get a nice side line if you hold it just so. Not as wide as the Prismacolor, but it does put down a nice good coat, has that little scratchy noise, and then you still get you get almost the same small tip as the other end of the marker. So these are the Stettlers. These are kind of medium grade, still a little bit expensive, but I bought the box set, I think for like 15 bucks. And I got quite a few markers, and they have wonderful colors, as you can see, which is the reason why I bought this set. You can see a nice variety of colors. It's not just your primary colors. You get a nice pink and a good array of blues and ambers. So I got those at Michael's, I believe. So good quality. I would say the pigment doesn't last as long as the Prismacolors. I found like I brushed out through those fairly quickly. As we talked about in watercolor last month, if you were here, paper makes a difference too. This is the mixed media paper. So you got, I'll just show you the cover to this sketchbook. It's the mixed media, and that can take a lot of wet surfaces. So it held up to watercolor really well. It really holds up to pen and ink very well. It does have, you can't really tell in the light, but it does have a little bit of a tooth, not too much texture, but a little bit of tooth. So when I say it holds up, I've got some thinner paper, which I can show you almost like copy paper. And just like with watercolor, it'll start to bleed through. So this mixed media holds up and prevents against bleed as well. And I'll show you bleed here in a little bit, what I mean by that. The other option is your run-of-the-mill, Crayola marker. you know, the probably best buy on the market right now. This particular one, both of these right here are watercolor markers, and I prefer those because I use them in screen printing. I can do a screen print process with water soluble markers with a technique using transparent base. So I keep watercolor markers on hand, but they're pretty much the same consistency as your regular Crayola markers. You get that nice wide tip. What's nice about these is if you want a lovely wash, because they are water soluble, you can take your brush and make a wash out of them. So you can see this is the thin tip, so you can get the chisel, you get that nice fine line, or you can, again, like the Staedtlers, you can just do that nice side layering effect. With the watercolor markers, which I'll show you, I'll just show you right now. The wash is pretty lovely. It's a nice option if you have big areas that you need to cover and you don't want those brush lines. You don't want those, when you have wide areas, let's say I wanted to cover the entirety of this circle with marker. If you're just using the marker, then you're going to go line by line. And you see how I'm overlapping? So I'm doing a line, right? And I'm not going to below it trying to meet it. I'm overlapping just slightly. And you get that overlap. And this marker currently still has, it's still got a lot of ink, a lot of pigment coming out of it. And then I would go, if you let it dry, you can see how you now got that streak line, right? Like you've got lines. And there's ways in which you can cross hatch to really get a full solid background. Sometimes the lines work in your favor and you can do this sort of hatching technique with other colors on top to give you some real fun, almost painterly dimension. And we'll play around with that tonight as we just start doing some more of the processes. But as you have these watercolor markers, that same circle, I can do a couple quick outlines here. Just get a nice thick line out here. And then I can grab me a little paintbrush, dip it in water. So I've got just a regular paintbrush, dip it in some water. And then it's just working with watercolors. You start pulling all that pigment in. Now you're gonna see once I build that up, it is much more of a wash. You're not going to get as solid as you get here, but you do get that wonderful painterly feel. So if you have big wide areas that you're not afraid to have a little wash look, you can use those watercolor markers. It just depends on what your project is that you're doing. You can even go over this solid one to take some of those lines out. Keep that pigment strong. You can almost use that as a palette too, because now my brush is charged with that pigment. Look at that. It's just like using watercolors. I'm just using that to pull my colors from. So lots of really wonderful things you could do with those watercolor markers. I'm going to stick tonight for the sake of, since we already did watercolor last week, I'm going to stick with just your standard watercolor markers tonight. I'm sorry, your standard markers tonight, not watercolor markers. So those are examples of different line marks. Before we start getting into the drawing, one thing I want to go into is the potential for blending and using these markers to blend. The other thing I love about Prismacolors is they give you, you get a really good variety of grays, and it goes up by percentage marks. I don't know if you could see that, but this is cool gray, 20%, there's a 30%, and it just gets you slightly darker or slightly lighter. And I really love, you can see that's almost white, right? It's almost clear what I just drew here. So it's really lovely to be able to have these gray cool tones. Like this is a warm, so you can go the difference between warm and cool. This is a warm gray at 30%. And you'll be able to see the difference here. So the difference between the warm and cool colors there. And the Prismacolors are lovely because you can do one stroke and get a fairly decent coverage. Or you can really start to build up these really fun layers and get some of that transparency to come through. And I can take that warm gray and take this this Selodian green and just really start to bring those colors together and start to layer them and get these really wonderful transitions. I just love the ability to do that little bit of transparency work through that. We'll play with this in the uniform in the parachute image. But I just wanted to show you a little bit of how these work, and you can see that watercolor, how it's starting to dry up there.
Yvette, we have a question.
Okay.
Is there a way to erase mistakes with markers?
You know, it's tough. Where there's a will, there's a way. I don't traditionally have like a quick answer. The biggest thing I would say is, I kept this here from last month. If you were with us in watercolor, there's this frisket. So if you have white areas that you know you're going to need to be blocked out, that you don't want to accidentally go into, you could apply this frisket down where the white areas are and let it dry. Do your illustration, and when it's done, you use a white eraser to pull it all out. Marker's tough. It's not as forgiving as your other mediums. You really have to, the one thing I wanted to say with starting with marker is it's good to start with a drawing in mind. It's much more geared toward illustration. People do use it for amazing, wonderful things like portrait work. I like to layer a lot. I have a very heavy hand, so marker isn't necessarily my first choice, but I did a lot of marker work when I was younger because of the way that the colors bleed together. I like experimenting with bleeds. Some people are very strict about staying in the lines. I say embrace the bleed. Like, you let that be your sort of dimensionality of the image. On this one, I might get a little like weirded out, like, oh no, what did I do? But you know, it's just a drawing. And the other mistake fixer, razor blade, and you can cut it out. But I honestly, I would say just embrace the mistake and figure out a different direction. With marker, it's helpful to start light to dark because you can start to build up. Whereas if you put a dark layer down, you're not going to be able to pull out unless you're using watercolor markers. You're not going to be able to pull back out and lighten it up, but you can always make things darker. If you're worried about mistakes with markers, I suggest the watercolor markers. I tell you what, these things cost, they're really, really cheap. At Target, Walmart, at grocery stores have them, the Crayola watercolor markers. I'm not sure of the longevity in terms of like fine art purposes, but in terms of what you get for your money, you can do some really amazing things with these watercolor markers. I've become a great fan of them simply because you can then add the water, and like with watercolor, you can maybe pull some of that pigment back out. It's just a matter of practice. So that's a really good question. Markers are not as forgiving at all, especially the one I didn't talk about is, then we get into real stuff. This is a paint marker. So you get into, this is just opaque pigmented paint directly on. And I worked with these in Iraq too. In my sergeant's book, it had all my orders of the day, but then it had all of these wonderful drawings that I did in paint marker as well. And this will draw on walls. This will draw on stone. This goes on paper, and you can, oh, this one must be out. You usually can hear it almost like a spray can where it goes click, 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 click. These have that same sort of element in it. So if you want to go bold, go with the paint markers. I mean, they have rich colors. They're gorgeous. These would actually do really well for the sticker drawings. I think I covered all the markers I have in house. There's, of course, just like any other, that you know, you've got your Sharpies is my other favorite. I have Sharpies, and then the markers that I had growing up with my dad. I'm trying to find, I know I have one here. They have a very specific look to them. Here they are. My dad, when I grew up, my dad was in law school and I used to go to law school with him when I was a little kid. I was 3 years old and he'd give me a legal pad and he had a set of these markers. Are you guys familiar with these felt tip pens? This was my marker of choice for many years simply because of that experience. And then they started coming out in all these different colors. You can see it's just a felt tip pen, wonderful line, but you can get really sketcherly with them. So I have these in a sketchbook. And when I'm at a cafe or out at a bar, I will draw whatever is around me in these wonderful vibrant colors because you get this sketcherly effect, but you can start like doing a lot of cross hatching and just get wonderful elements and think about your dad at the same time. So that's a lot of different markers. I could go on and on, right? So play with it. Markers are fun to add to other drawings. Tonight we're going to focus on this drawing, and then I have one other patch. And then if we have time, the idea of starting out with a good drawing works. This is an illustration that I did for a drawing exchange. It has nothing to do with the military, but it's got some corn and different elements of corn. You can't tell in the black and white drawing, but once you start adding some of these colors and washes in it, you can get a really beautiful drawing. So I wanted to have a drawing that maybe wasn't as was a little bit more figurative, not as illustrator-y. So that being said, let's go ahead and start. The other thing that's helpful when you're starting is that to have your palette in mind of what colors go where, so you don't end up in that place where there's nowhere to go and all of a sudden you've layered marker on top of marker and you have a muddy mess, which is honestly when I took the markers to the lake to draw the lake with markers is what happened, because I started with these blues and greens and browns, and it was really great at first, and then I went too far. That is the one thing with markers, it will tell you when you've gone too far. So here we go. Let's start out. I thought what we would do is that this little background image here that I mentioned were the windows of the B-29 bomber. I was going to do in blue. The 40th Air or 40th Bomb Group had a patch that had blue, yellow, and red, which was pretty common in World War II. So I'm not going out on a limb here with that color scheme. And I'm going to take my, I mean, let us know in chat if you need another reference image and I'll put it up as my screen behind me. But I think I'm just going to leave me up. So if I have to hold up a marker or something, you can see it. But what I'll do is I put these up as my virtual background. So like I said, if you need me to get out of the way and you need another reference image, it's there. But for now, I'll move me over. Just gotta do a little shift. So now you'll be able to see the reference image and you'll be able to see me a little bit if I need to hold up a marker. Okay, so like I said, I thought we would do blue in here, and it's a very primary blue. So let's find that in my Prismacolors, because why not? I want to use them. Let's use them. That's what I bought them for. Let's find. Now, the one good thing to do with markers, like I had this sheet, is that if before you apply, if you want to double check and make sure this is the color you want to go with, you can do a quick art store look at it, right? Like when we go to the art store and we're like, ooh, we can sample these. That's what we're doing here. And I think even though the patch is more this color, graphically, I think I'm going to stick with this color because I want it to pop. I want it to have a little bit of vibrance. So I'm going to take some artistic license here and do it. And I mean, the honest truth is when this gets done, it's going to be done in Illustrator anyway, and I'll be able to pop whatever color I want in. So if you are nervous about your line work, you can go through and start with your fine tip and outline. Now, I know those of you that are working with me, you don't have this drawing prepared for you. So if you have a sketch that you want to start with, or if you want to take some time while I'm walking you through this, let us know in chat and I'll turn my face off so you can look at the drawing and maybe do your rendition of it. Oh, and then Molly also, thank you, Molly. Molly put in the chat that the image can also be found on our blog post on our webpage. I didn't mention that at the beginning. All of the images that we're using tonight can be found at the webpage listed in chat. If you're audio only right now, it's www.wis, vets, V as in Victor, ETS, museum.com, and then go to the blog post, and it is August Drink and Draw. So again, it's in the chat. If you need it, let Molly know if you need that repeated. Also, the Steiner story that I talked about with the parachute, we'll try to get you that link too if you want to see what the parachute dress looks like on our website. And it's Steiner, Molly, Steiner. I think it's Steiner family. Okay, so again, if you're concerned, for me, I have pretty steady line work. So I'm going to take my chisel part of my marker and I'm just going to go in and start doing I'm going to start filling in these spaces. But if you're worried about going outside the lines, it's okay. I'll let room for the perfectionist to hang out with us. So use your fine tip part if you have it and give yourself that outline. This is one that's acting like 2003. It's a little dried up on that end, but you can go in, start doing your outline. Now this is one where I broke my own rule. I said start with your light colors first. Behind this is going to be yellow. So in reality, I probably should start with my yellow first, because if I don't, I'm going to end up with a lot of green areas. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Let me grab my yellow. So you guys catch up with the drawing if you want to do a similar drawing to this. And honestly, this drawing is just a series of circles. Half circle here, half circle down here, cut it in half, and then another circle, just do a little stick figure. And then you've got your perspective box. We're going to be working on a course of real simple perspective lessons coming up in the future, 1-point, 2-point perspective, because that's one of my Achilles heels. So let me get the yellow that I'm thinking of. Let's see. Yeah, I think that looks good. So in the background here, and you can see where I've got my pencil. I might be going over the line a little bit that way. That's fine. And honestly, if I were doing this for a formal final presentation, I would use a different type of pencil that was a lot lighter mark. And I might even go through and do my final drawing with the colors in mind, so I don't have that black outline. After we're done, we can go and erase some of that, but I probably won't be able to erase much of that. And again, don't be afraid to color outside of the lines. We want to have fun with this. The one thing about, if you choose markers are a fun medium. They're meant to be fun. They're meant to be quick. They're meant to give, as in architectural drawings, they're meant to give the essence of color, like on the tips of trees, like just quick washes. I don't think they were ever intended to be so formal and uptight. Now, if you're a professional marker artist, please don't take offense to that. But I think that, in my opinion, markers are much more whimsical than anything else. So I'm going to give myself that little bit of yellow outline. And you can see up here where I was talking about, where I had already gone blue and oops, I colored outside the lines. It's fine. And it made a nice little green. So if you're just playing around with a drawing, you can see yellow and blue makes green, right? Those are the Your primary colors mixed together. Red and yellow make orange. Yellow and blue makes green. Red and blue makes purple. So, and that varies depending on the, shade of yellow you're using. So I'm just going to go through, do this quick yellow background. So if we're being real, on a B29, that would actually be ship gray, like battleship gray. But because I want this to be a fun sticker, it's going to be yellow. So guess what, Dick Steiner? Your B29 boop, is yellow now. He probably wouldn't care. He wanted his wife to make a dress out of this. I mean, I think he had a little creative bone in him. If you Google parachute dress, this was very common to make a wedding dress out of parachute cloth. So there's many archival references to women making these dresses. Now, I took a little artistic liberty with this drawing because this was not, in fact, Majill's wedding gown, but I gave her a bouquet because I needed some sort of motion to match his holding the cords. It was an evening gown. Back then, they still had flowers everywhere and took flowers in their corsages. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue to do that. And that's a nice, fun, I think, beginning layer of color on this drawing. And what we could do, if we make it for time toward the end, I always have I talk too much, so we may run out of time, but what you can do, you see this yellow as we start to add more color to it, it gets a little darker, right? So if you wanted to add fun little maybe bits of shadow to give some dimension or graphic intention, we'll keep everything to the left. I'll take a little bit darker color yellow, more on the orange side. That might be a little too dark. Let's see.
Yvette, I think we have a question.
Okay. Give it to me.
I'm
Let me see. I'm gonna look at the chat.
Oh, no. Oh, you're asking a question? I have a question. I can't get my picture of you drawing. I can only get a picture of you.
Okay. If you go up to view, can you see the icon that says view? And it looks like a little square with squares on top of it.
No.
It's usually on the top right, and on your, are you on an iPad or on a phone?
I'm on a pad.
Okay. I'm trying to see where view is on my iPad. Oh, it should be on the top left. It should be like 4 little squares.
No.
Yeah, it's usually just a little icon. If you're on your iPad, it has like a white box with 3 little squares, or it looks like a grid of like 5 squares. Did you find it or no? Did we lose her? I'll tell you what, if you get a chance, if we lost you and you can still hear me, it's a little icon that has a bunch of little squares, and if you tap on that, you should be able to either get a grid view or a full page view. And if it's full page, it should be the side by side because of the way we've got our settings set up. Okay. I don't know if we lost you. Shoot us a chat if you can still hear us. We can't still hear you, but I think you're still on with us.
Yeah, she's still there, but yeah, definitely send us a message in chat and we can try to talk you through this a little bit the best we can.
Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. I don't want you to miss out, but I can also in some way show you. So what we can do is I can go back onto the screen here. Every once in a while, I'll just pop back and do this, where you can see where I've been drawing. So now if you still see me, I'll take my virtual background off. Okay. So if you still see me, this is what I've been working on so far, is I've added the yellow lines. I started with the blue, but then I decided I'll go ahead and go with my yellow first so that I don't end up getting too many green lines, and it'll keep me more disciplined with that blue, and I'll get the rich yellow. And now what I'm about to do is I'm about to add some extra color onto that yellow. So folks that have been watching, stick with me. And for you that is having trouble seeing the drawing, I'll continue to flip back and forth until maybe you tell us that you've figured out how to switch the view. So my first one was tangerine. So I'm going to take this ochre and I'm just going to do a slight line. I think that one's the one too dark. This is where we start doing a little mixing of color. I'll play with that, and what I would do is I'll just start playing with the different types of variations of that yellow to give a little bit more dimension. But for the sake of time, I'm going to stick with going to the blue. So I'm using a Copenhagen blue, and I'll start filling in these squares. So let me And if there's anybody else in chat that was having trouble seeing or getting their view correct, please let us know, because I'd hate to just be talking and you guys aren't able to see what we're working on. Now I'm just taking the blue. And you see for this one, because it's an illustration, I'm looking at real solid blocks of color. I'm not trying to be painterly. I will get a little bit more creative with the use of the marker once we get into the uniform. But you can see here, I'm just looking for these solid bits of color here. And I really like the way that one's applying on this Copenhagen blue. And I'll show folks of you that need to look. So I just applied this blue to, oh, she was able to figure it out. Great, thanks, Jen. Great, so then we'll just keep working from here, and I'll go ahead and put the virtual background up too, so if folks need that drawing. There we go. All right, so we'll keep going with this blue. And you see where the blue and the yellow overlap on top here. It gave me a green, but I actually don't mind that. You can't really see it on camera here, but this part right here, where the yellow and the blue meet, gave me that sort of green hue. I kind of like that it creates that little bit of a shadow. And that's the thing you can play with. It's funny, the more I work in graphic design and the more I work with Illustrator and Procreate, we're trying to find all these wonderful tricks for these like little transparencies to create exactly what we thought would have been a mistake back in the day, right? Like this whole not coloring in the lines. We have spent years now perfecting Illustrator to get that exact look. So this is what I say. I don't really think, don't beat yourself up if you think it's a mistake, because 9 times out of 10, it's just going to add a different quality to your image. And you can see I'll go one direction and then I'll just go another one to get all of the full color body on there. The one thing with markers that I think we all have a tendency to do is, I'm going to do it with my Crayola because I don't want to mess up my Prismacolor. We have a tendency to color like this. You hear that sound? I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it's the scratchy, scratchy, scratchy. There's nothing more to stand the hairs on the back of my neck than that sound, which sometimes is really freeing, but markers work best when you take your time and build up your layers. And for me, that is one of the hardest things to do because I'm such an impatient artist. But really, you get your best results when you take your time and you don't wear your markers out. This is the fastest way to wear out your marker. I actually just got the shivers again. So I'll stop doing that. So take your time, and it helps you build up your line control as well. So you'll see here as I apply this, I'm going to go in. That actually leads me to something. So if you don't want to bleed over, okay, so you see this line, where I stopped. The way to prevent bleed, all markers going to have a little bit of bleed, which means it goes into the paper and it seeps out a little bit. If you've ever seen that, copy paper does it. Let's get me some copy paper.
Yvette, can you show the color drawing a little more so someone can?
Yep, on my screen.
Yep, your color. Yeah.
So I'll put it over.
Oh, it's okay on the bottom, I think.
Oh.
She's just trying to copy it.
Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
So we are, if we think about bleed, these probably won't do it as badly because the Prismacolor have a real nice, but I remember I used to color on my book covers in school, and it would, if you had an outline like this, inevitably you would think if you're going right up against the line was what you needed to do, but it bleeds over. Sharpies do it. Sharpies have more of the bleed. That's funny. I'm trying to talk about bleed and it won't do it now. So we're gonna pretend that I'm just always that spot on and my line never bleeds over. To avoid that, what we want to do is you want to get close to the line. Let's see if I can get close to the line, but just slightly to the left or right of it, depending on what you want, and then pull down. And then that way, if you have any bleed, it will bleed into the area that you've kept your distance. Here on the top here, I want that overlap, so I'm going to go right up on top. But on the side here, I'm going to go just a little bit away and pull it down so that I keep that a clean line. And I'll straighten that out for you guys so you can see. Yeah, and I tell you what, to get you guys caught up to, let me fill that in. To get you, if you all want to look at this drawing for a little bit and get caught up on doing your rendering, I can talk about our next story for just a couple seconds. It's already 7:48, so we won't get into coloring it, but I would like to share that story with you. And I don't have a lot of details on it because we've just started going over these stories. So give me 1 second. Let me pull it up and then I'll put this back down for you. All right. So there you go. So what we have here, and I'll take it back off, is a penguin on a yin and yang on an iceberg, and it says top and bottom of the world. And what the penguin is wearing is a big giant like Antarctic ski jacket. So I'll take that back off so you guys can catch up on this one. We have a chaplain that served in the Antarctic, and he has this wonderful full giant Antarctic fleece that's this great teal mint color, and it's covered in patches of his time serving overseas in the Antarctic. And we have one of the patches is this penguin with the yin and yang, and he's standing on an iceberg. But I decided to put the jacket from the chaplain on the penguin. And I know we have a really good story on that, and I didn't pull it up like I did the Steiners. but I think visually it's just going to be really fun to draw this penguin wearing a jacket, which penguins don't need a jacket, but it'll have the jacket with all the patches on it. And so we're happy to see that that's another object that wouldn't likely usually see an exhibit other than one of these souvenir exhibits. So we'll go ahead and go back to the drawing here. I think you guys get the idea of the blue and the yellow. So I'm going to move on to the box. And the reason is the box is going to give us a little bit of room to play with this sort of buildup of color that I was telling you about. So I'm going to start with this sort of light walnut. And that's going to be way lighter than we want to go with that box. But this is how I'm going to start adding color to get, I might add some of this Tuscan red. And then let me get my browns. We've got this light umber here. So I'm going to start with light walnut. And I'm just going to, let's say our light source, we're actually going to pretend like we have a light source here, right? Like the sun's going to be coming from the right. So we want this side to be lighter, and then this side is going to be darker. So I'm just going to start adding in some of this. This square right here is going to be the package label of him shipping it home. So we're going to leave that untouched right now. I'm just going to build some of this up. And you can see as I start working the lines, this is where you start to get the fun illustrative. You can see where I can work light to dark just with this marker alone. I can start building up more color and leave a couple of little light areas. So what I'll actually do that here. I'm going to do the leaf of the box. What do you call it? The flap. I'm going to add some more color there, and then I'm going to start adding here, but we're going to end up having to make this a lot darker because it's got shadow on it. This left side is dark because it is opposite of the light source, but it's also going to be dark because the flap is on top of it. So there's going to be a shadow there. So you can really start to see that wonderful cartoony wash start happening. So what I'll do is to give it just a little bit of oomph, I'm going to use this red. I'm going to see how it works first though. I'm going to do a little sample. So if I had, well, that's the light umber. This is why we do this. If I have this color that I just used, which was the light walnut, right? And I want to add a little dimension to it. I'm going to put some of this red in, just a little bit. And I might go back. I think that red's going to be too red. Because you can really start to add some wood grain feel to it. I think for right now, I'm going to leave the red out and I'm going to go to this light umber for the side of the box. So you can see I added a little bit of that too. And that's what we'll do. I'm going to do as an artist, you really don't want to ever do a dark outline. It's a bad habit we get into thinking, oh, that's the comic book look. But even great comic books don't actually use outlines. They use the layers of colors building up to give the illusion of your outline. But you never want to just see like a black outline. That's a very specific type of comic that uses that. That's not what we're doing here. So you can see I kind of use some of that brown to pull in and give some depth to that. And then here, where it's dark, and I want where the flap is now hanging over, there's going to be a shadow under there. So that's where I'll pull in this red and just do a little bit of a line work there. And give it a little bit of a shadow. So you can't really tell in this camera angle. You can see there's a little shadow there. We might even go with a little bit of a more blue, or use this one of these cool grays. This corn, oh, that's cornflower. We'll do a warm. Let's see. Do a cool gray, 30%. This is not an Iraq one, and I can tell you that because the label changed. So this one is more recent, and I'm gonna laugh if it's dried up. If my ones from Iraq held up. It is. The grays have a tendency to dry out faster too. Just if you're gonna buy these, something to know. But you can see I can use that cool gray as a nice just little line that goes, nice little shadow on top of it, doesn't change the color. And then I'm going to do that in here. So inside the box, I'm going to go back to my light walnut. Which, why are you doing that, Yvette? It's inside the box. It should be darker. Yes, it should be. And we're going to make it darker. How's everybody doing on getting their drawing together? I know we kind of rushed through right in. I dove right into the drawing after story time. I dropped my lid, so give me a sec. Okay, so you can see I've got a little bit dark there. It needs to be even darker to give the illusion of it dropping in a space. So what I'm going to do is find a even darker version of gray. That's why I love these grays, because I can go cool gray 70%, which really pumps it up. But what I'm going to go for is this French gray, because see how it's that's a gray, but it's almost brown. Let me show you what that French gray looks like. This is one of my favorite colors in the Prismacolor. It's gorgeous. It's this wonderful warm gray. These kinds of, this is the difference between Prismacolor and Crayola. You can't get this variation of the gray palette with like your regular standard markers. These are probably one of the biggest beneficial markers that you can get as for blending. Let's go here and do that French gray. Yeah, you can see it's really starting to give us that illusion of depth where he's falling backwards. He's falling into that box. And then I'll do even one more darker warm gray. This is a warm gray, 70%. For that really back end. There we go. All right, so I like the way that's looking. I'm going to go ahead and do this flat with the light walnut. You can see I'm really starting to build these colors up. And what I'll do is I'm gonna add some of that light umber on the corners and then blend it in. When I say blend it in, I'm going to take that walnut again and just work it in. And use the marker to blend it together. And I think for this one, I want to finish off with some of this French gray. Okay, so the flaps still need a little work, and I'll keep working on them. But you can sort of use how you do this line work as a way to give a little bit of dimension. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna fill in this blue really quickly just so I can give myself that visual break, my eye, that visual break down here, like I have up here. Give you a second to look at that. I'll take a drink of my water. I know we're at 8 o'clock, Eric and Molly. I'm gonna go just a few minutes over if that's okay. Just so we can sort of wrap this up a little because I did a lot of story time in the beginning. This hour flies by every month. Now we mentioned, I think Eric mentioned a little bit at the very beginning, we have reopened our doors back at the museum, which is super exciting. I love that you all are still here. I know many of you are not in Wisconsin. When you do have a chance to visit Madison, please come visit us in person now. We're on the Capitol Square, so Madison is the capital of Wisconsin, and our museum sits directly across the street from the state capitol. We are super excited to have our doors open. We've had a couple of in-person events, which is we're dusting off the cobwebs with the in-person events. It's been a fun. I know Eric and Molly and his team have been super busy because they're pulling double duty now. They're doing a little bit of virtual work and they're doing all these in-person events. So we're grateful. We're grateful for you guys. Thank you very much. I know it's a lot of work. And our foundation, of course, is continuing to not only bring us the capability to do these events, but they are also working hard to bring the in-person events back to the status that we left them at. We've got a few announcements before we sign off tonight about upcoming events in person and online. I will continue to be bringing you guys Drink and Draw every month for the foreseeable future. I'm enjoying hanging out with you guys every month. I think it's really successful, and it's a really great way to continue for us to continue to explore the collection that doesn't usually get talked about. So next month, what I'll do is by next month, well, let's see, next month is September. Well, while you guys are still here and we're wrapping up, September, we will have Drink and Draw. October, we have our in-person cemetery tours back this year. Last year we had to do it virtually. This year we are in person. So that's going to fall on the week that Drink and Draw normally would fall on, and it's all hands on deck for cemetery tours. So we apologize, but we're going to be absent from the virtual realm for the month of October and unfortunately the month of November because we have gallery night here in Madison, and we are going to be doing a live Drink and Draw in the museum. Now I'll talk to Eric about it. Maybe we might still be able to broadcast while we're in the museum. I don't see why that couldn't happen. So we'll talk about that, but I can't make any promises because we can only be in so many places at one time. But if we can do that and still bring you the hour of fun from the inside of the museum, that might be kind of fun. I can give you guys a tour for those of you that don't get to come to Madison and see the museum. I can step away from gallery night festivities and walk you through the museum and show you the live printmaking event we're going to be having for gallery night. So super exciting. I will share that with you guys. Eric, I hate to like just drop that. I'll talk to you about that and see if it's even an option. And you know, I think it's really great that we are able to continue to see you all every month and share this hour. It's been a lot of fun, and we're going to keep things happening. Oh, I said October, November, we're gone. We'll be back in December. And when we're back in December, unless we do the special guest presentation in November, I will show you the stickers that these are going to become. So you'll be able to see the final version of some of these images that we were working on. And you should be able to purchase them through our gift shop too. So it might be kind of fun to have something that you helped me work out the final design for this. I think if you guys give us a thumbs up or in the chat and think about the color scheme and let me know if I'm on the right track with this yellow and blue, I think I might be. I'll just give you one little overview of the uniform that I talked about in terms of blending. World War II was kind of a brownish olive. It depended on where they were at and what uniform they were wearing. For the paratroopers, there was a lot of different camouflage elements, but at the end of the day, it was really much more of this olive, which was essentially a brown olive. So I'm going to do this green, and we're just going to do this quickly. Whenever I do like an olive or an army uniform, I like to start with a fun green. And then that's where these French grays really come in. I'm going to add a little of this green, this blue. Markers can really start to play with this idea of shadow and light. And you start layering them, especially, like I said, if you start light to dark, you can really start to build up some of these colors. And then you get this French gray. I'm gonna see, that's 50%. I'm gonna see if I can find one that's just a little bit lighter. There's a 40%. Ooh, okay, we'll start with French gray 20%. And the French gray is that nice warm. I'm just gonna do. And you guys can see, I literally just did a couple lines. I'm not even trying to be fancy staining the lines. And then, so that was French gray 20. Then I'll start working my way up. This is a French gray 40. I'm just gonna do a little extra. And you see how I'm really starting to get that sort of watercolory illustrative look going on. So now we'll do a French gray 50, and I'm just going to start building up this color. It must be time. My cat has finally found her way back into the studio. We're at French gray 60%, and then I'm just going to put that on there, and then we're going to wrap things up. And you can see on this one, I really wasn't overly concerned about staining the lines. I was just trying to get these colors laid in. But see how you can see it, and it actually created that really just sort of fun watercolory depth. And I'll add a little bit more details on it. But you can play around with, I added that really bright green and then just started adding French grays, and I got that olive as the result. So Dick Steiner's on his way. He's coming down the chute. Let's see, really quickly while we wrap this up, is anybody, I'm just going to scroll through. Does anybody want to show us their drawing? I know you guys didn't have a chance to have an image beforehand, but if anybody wants to hold up their drawing, they're welcome to do so. Okay, Stacy, let me pin you. Hold on. Oh, nice. You were able to really get a good part of the drawing. I love that. You were able to get the blue, and the blue's pretty close to what I was working on. I love it. Thank you. Okay. And thank you for coming back. It's good to see you. I got, who we got? Sherry. Sherry, you're with us on video. Okay. Hi. Oh my goodness. Okay. So we see you. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. See, I think that's a really good way in which if we wanted to focus just on the parachute, that's exactly what we would do. We'd center on the circle of the V29. I might actually, Sherry, if you don't mind, I might actually take that and do a different sticker as well with just him in the parachute. I'll send the credit. Shout out to you. So good to see you. Nice to meet you in person. Well, virtual person. Anybody else? I'm just quickly scrolling through. No? Okay. I'm not sure if Eric's still with us. Eric, are you still here? Do you want to say anything, or Jen Carlson, about upcoming events? All right. Well, there he is.
Yvette, I'm having connection problems, Yvette. So I just caught you right on the last tail of that. I hope everybody can hear me. I just wanted to just kind of piggyback off what Yvette said earlier about October and November being absent on drink and draws, but you can still join us for all the rest of our events, trivia night, movie discussion night. We have some great book talks coming up, and also our curators corner. So there's other ways for you to stay connected with us and for us to stay connected with you. But we will miss drink and draw for sure. Like I said, I hope everybody can hear me. Everybody's frozen on my screen right now, but I just want to thank you for coming out tonight. Yvette, once again, fantastic job as always.
Thanks.
You say these hours fly by. Even for me, I'm not even drawing. I'm just having a great time watching everybody else, draw and learn from you. And of course, you're just great to watch as well. So much fun, and you love this stuff.
Yeah, this week was a lot of fun. I'm excited about souvenirs coming up and the images that are starting to come out of it. So thank you all for indulging me and walking me through that. But that's a fun story. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. Sometimes we can get some really fun stories to share with you. And I think there's more to come. We're looking at perspective in the near future. I got some oil pastels. I need to do a little touch up with my oil pastels. So I want to be a little bit better prepared for that one. But we're going to be looking at pastels, perspective, and then Amber Hoy eventually will join us with Sumi Ink. And that's going to be really amazing. So she just got married, so we're letting her enjoy her honeymoon, and then she'll be with us to teach the class. So again, y'all, thank you so much for being here. Time flies on a Friday night, and I think if you just keep drawing, like I said, the image here before I started coloring it is on the webpage at the blog post that we shared. Just go to our webpage, wisvetsmuseum.com. You can go to the blog post. You can see all the images from each of the drink and draws. And then you can also visit our YouTube channel. Just go to Wisconsin Veterans Museum's channel, and you can see all the recordings of the YouTubes from the past, of all the drink and draws on YouTube that we've done. You're welcome to watch those if you want to review some of the ones we've done over the last 18 months. So I think that's it, you all. And once I finish this, I'll try to get it up on the blog post too, because I think our staff will want to see this one finished. So. And Carlson says, thank you for joining us, everybody. Yes, from our foundation, thank you. And have a good evening, a safe weekend. Enjoy this weather. If you're in heat zones, please stay safe. If you're in fire zones, please stay safe. If you're in COVID hotspots, please, please, please stay safe. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next month.